It's a great way for the little guy to get access to what the fat cats are investing in.
Welcome into the Get Invested podcast, a podcast about all things real estate and real estate investing, brought to you by Capital Velocity Investments and a part of the Matthias Talks Investing Substack.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Get Invested podcast with your hosts, Jordan and Matthias. As always, we're excited to be here to talk all things investing real estate and real estate investing. Today, it's going to be real estate investing. We're going to stick to the wheelhouse. We were talking about how, and it's part of our mission that I'm sure many of you know, and we'll get into, but essentially being a little bit more intentional about when we get to the end of a raise, really making a push to get in as many investors as possible, as long as we're obviously abiding by all rules, which we'll get into that as well. And, you know, I called it the come one, come all, like yelling from the mountaintops kind of push. And, you know, that started us chatting, and it occurred to me that we really haven't talked about why we do the type of syndication we do in a long time, nor have we really just broken down what a syndication is in very basic terms for any of our perhaps newer listeners. So what we're going to do today is basically dive in to what is a syndication and why do we do the type that we do. So Matthias, take it away.
Yeah, I think it'll become clear our thinking, I suppose, and in how we get after some of the missions that we have and priorities that we have at the company and within the restrictions that are placed on us. So yeah, I figured we'd just get into it. So in terms of broad definition of syndication, it's basically investors pooling money together to buy an asset that would be difficult or impossible for one or more of the investors to get on their own, right? So it's kind of like, think of it as like joining a club to go attack something that you can all individually wouldn't be possible. It's technically private equity. So if you invest in syndications, you technically are investing in private equity according to the SEC and all the Securities Commission, all the rules they have. But the best way to think of it is just there needs to be somebody experienced leading it. That's kind of the goal. And then other investors joining up with varying levels of sophistication that can either help run the investment or that will be passive, silent partners, as it were. So that's the best way to, I think, to phrase it to the beginner.
Right. Another way that seems pretty straightforward that I've found useful is people understand that you can invest in a local business and be a partner in it, right? You can help back a business or be part of it. That's in a lot of ways what this is. You are investing in essentially a small business.
True.
That small business just happens to own an apartment complex in this instance, right? So that's another way that is straightforward. But I know we don't like to use, not that we avoid it or we're like hedging, but private equity means so many different things to so many different people that.
I mean, it's a bad guy in a lot of scenarios.
Yeah.
But it's also a great way for the little guy to get access to what the fat cats are investing in, you know, like it has been democratized a certain way, which is what we're always pushing for, right? Wanting to bring the best, highest quality investments to the lowest level of investor. But there's two specific types of offerings that are in our realm of the type of investing we do. It's Regulation D in the SEC regulations. It's a 506B and a 506C, and they're very similar in how they're structured, but the difference is the 506C is limited to only accredited investors. So I've got the definition pulled up here. So an accredited investor, according to the SEC right now, is a person that has an annual income that exceeds $200,000 or $300,000 for a household. So if it's an individual, it's $200. For a household, it's $300 for 2 years, and that individual expects to continue making that same amount in the year they're making the investment. Or someone whose net worth is $1 million or higher, excluding any equity they have in their primary residence. It can count real estate equity, just not the one in the house you live in, if that makes sense. So those are the two ways a person can qualify as an accredited investor. There's some other complicated ways. You start getting to investment companies and things like that, but for the basic investor, these are the definitions that matter. So basically, 506Cs are limited to accredited investors, which means they're basically limited to millionaires. In very simple terms, you can only invest if you're a millionaire in a 506C offering. So that doesn't do much to get after our company goal to kind of connect the lowest level investor with the highest quality of investment. So obviously, doesn't really satisfy what we're trying to accomplish, I'd say.
Right. Yeah. We're going to get into that a little bit more. But like you said earlier, the democratization of access to private equity opportunities. Right. So there are ways absolutely where someone could be an accredited investor and also have benefited from the democratization and be on that journey, of course. But
sure,
if we're talking about starting people, most likely they're not coming in at that level. If you're wondering why that definition exists, the SEC's reasoning is essentially that if you are making that kind of money, have that kind of money, you're most likely someone who knows what they're doing or sophisticated enough to assess an opportunity. Or worst case scenario, you can stand to lose some.
You can absorb a loss.
You can absorb a loss. And so this is attempting to keep the less than, let's say, honest.
Yeah.
From talking to just anyone, I guess. I don't know. It's kind of a convoluted logic, honestly.
Yeah, I understand. It's to keep people from, like, snake oil salesmen from going to everybody's grandma and stealing their last $10,000 or swindling. Yeah, I suppose if you're going to draw restrictions, you got to put them somewhere. That's where they picked. It's pretty high in my like, I don't know. I'm pretty sure somebody making $120,000 in a small market, is probably living pretty, they're living as well as somebody in New York City making 250. So, you know what I mean? In terms of wealth and money management and what they're dealing with. So I get it. They got to draw a line somewhere, and they're trying to, their goal is to protect the consumer, right? That's their, from fraud and from, people taking advantage of other people. I get that. To me, sometimes it seems like it's limiting. It's more putting restrictions on the little guy versus the big guy, but I suppose there's going to be some level of that either way.
And I agree with all that, but to their credit, there is the 506B, and the main distinction goes right into what Matthias is saying. How do you come to hear about something like this and have an opportunity even to invest, or I guess in the SEC's mind, be swindled? If you are accredited, they can broadcast to you anything across any platform. But that's not the case for 506B, which gets at this kind of hoping to make sure that these investments are solid for those who aren't sophisticated or wealthy enough to take the blow.
Yeah, so that's a good way to case it. So basically, they put restrictions on 506B, the other type of offering. You can have both accredited and non-accredited investors. And because 506B allows non-accredited investors, which to the SEC are considered higher risk for being swindled, let's say, they put restrictions on what exactly a 506B offering can do. Whereas the accredited only, millionaire only offering, you can advertise, like you said, to the broad market. You can put, ads, you can send it to people you don't know, you can put it on a billboard if you want, whatever you want to do, you can advertise for those offerings. And you just don't let anybody invest that isn't an accredited, that can't prove they're an accredited investor. Basically, that's the restrictions they have. For 506B, the type of offering we do, we are not allowed to advertise our offerings to the broad market. That's to keep us from attracting perhaps gullible people, I suppose. I don't know. But the restriction placed on us is that anybody that invests in our offering has to hear about it directly from us, and they have to be known to us. It is my responsibility as the sponsor of the offering to verify that the person I make the offering to, that I present the opportunity to, it's an appropriate offering for them. So I'm not, if the minimum offering, let's say, raising $100 million and the minimum is $2 million, I'm not going to go to, my little brother and present him the offering. Obviously, this is a silly scenario, but the point is that it's my responsibility to determine if it's appropriate for them or not. And it doesn't necessarily just have to be, can they afford it? Like, do they have the, whatever the minimum is? That's not, there's more to it than that. It's, hey, do they understand the risk? Are they not using their, do they need that money in the next 30 days. They're, that kind of thing. So it's my responsibility, like an added layer built in to protect those people. Otherwise, I could lose my ability to do this and get fines from the SEC and all that stuff. So that's one of the restrictions they place on 506Bs. And then another restriction they place, which this one I'm not really sure about or why. I don't. It's hard for me to understand why, but I'm limited to 35 non-accredited investors per 506B offering. Now, again, I have to know them already, or I have to have a relationship with them prior to presenting the opportunity to them, and then I'm limited to 35. That one I really don't know. Maybe if there was some sort of mob mentality, I could start a cult maybe, and I don't know. I could start a cult and convince everyone, but I don't know. I could start a small cult too, so I don't know if that's going to keep me from it. But anyway, whatever the reason, the limit is 35. And now the interesting thing is that in a 506B offering, I can accept as many accredited investors as I want. There's no restrictions on they can invest in either. The millionaires can invest in either the 506B or the 506C. There's no restrictions on them other than if it's 506B, I have to have the same established relationship. Although if they're an accredited investor, it's a lot less digging and
there would be a
sure
lot
it's
less
appropriate
scrutiny.
on my end. Yeah, if they're an accredited investor, then we've all basically agreed that they're good to go. So those are kind of the main restrictions that are placed on 506B.
Yeah, your lack of charisma notwithstanding, the cult thing does seem like an unlikely scenario. But yeah, we've always wondered about the 35. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily the 35 because yes, if you're going to limit, you have to, again, choose a number, right? But the fact that you are like, oh, you are only allowed to possibly swindle 35 people, I don't, it doesn't really, if you carry that logic over.
I don't know how that's protecting anyone. Having a number of them, I don't either.
I don't know. The ideas of risk and gullibility doesn't really apply to that number, but
maybe maybe there's a stat somewhere that 1 out of every 36 people will be swindled in their lifetime. so I don't know. I got nothing.
It's that one's interesting. I will say that they did make the number high enough that if you were doing 506B, you're not trying to take down like a New York City high rise, right? Like,
yeah, we're not. So it's not $100 million. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you're trying to take down something that's, for lack of a better term, a modest property. That's probably 35 is going to be plenty. Don't think we've ever gotten close.
We've gotten close, but those were on the biggest of raises that we've gotten close before. So yeah, so it's not necessarily prohibitive, but what it does is it does impact the minimum investment.
Yes, and that was actually, that's where this started. So, and why we were talking about that kind of come one, come all phase. Honestly, the goal would be to get 35 if we could every single time.
Sure. Yeah, I agree that with the technology that we have. So when I first started this, I was cutting every check by hand, signing it by hand, mailing envelopes, like addressing envelopes I was mailing to the investors whenever we had distributions or whatever, which that can get pretty time prohibitive. But now we have an investor portal where we make ACH distributions securely. I could make, unlimited number of distributions a day if I needed to, kind of thing. So there's no added cost or effort, I would say, to me in order to have more investors per deal. So that technology enables us that's not really a problem in terms of having a few more versus a few less, as long as the money is the same. The target, we don't want to dilute everybody's shares by letting an unlimited number of people in, obviously.
Right, no.
But once we get to
the amount of money that we need,
let's say our target is 1 million, and we're at $950,000 of capital we've raised. It doesn't matter to me, as long as we're not bumping into any of those other restrictions we've talked about, whether that last 50K is filled up by 5 guys or by 1 guy.
Yeah,
it makes no difference on our end. So with that being said, obviously we try to get as many people in, and what tends to happen, kind of like how we started the conversation, towards the end of an offering, we'll go to people who really want to invest, who I know have expressed interest, but for whatever reason don't have the capital ready to deploy at that time, up to whatever the minimum investment was for the offering. Well, we can go back to them and say, hey, I have the leeway to accept any amount if I want to. So I'd like to go to them towards the end of the offering and say, hey, we're kind of there, and we still have space. Our number hasn't been. We're not at 35 yet.
Right.
Still have space in the offering. So let's say the minimum was 30 and they had 18. I could go, hey, you know what? We can take your 18,000. You come on in. We'll get you started. Get you working on building, because we don't do a tiered system where somebody invests 500,000 and they get a better return than somebody who invests 30,000. Every investor's
Every
dollar is treated the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of how many dollars you have. Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously, the guy who invests the 500,000, his check sizes are going to be huge compared to the other guy. But in order to get people started, this is kind of our bread and butter, is getting people in for what they can towards the end. So that is how we use within our framework and our restrictions that we have. That's what we try to do in order to get after our mission of connecting the lowest level investor that we can within the rules with this type of offering.
Absolutely. We don't talk about it that much anymore, I guess, but I would hope that most people know the backstory and where we're coming from with this, which is bringing this opportunity to people who otherwise wouldn't even know it existed. Kind of like we were. I mean, Matthias found out about it at some point, and then
I stumbled onto it. I didn't.
Yeah, exactly.
I went looking for something and I stumbled into it, and I was like, "Oh, this is pretty cool. I wish I had known about this sooner."
Right. So that we know well the very scenario, the type of people we're trying to bring this to, we were those people. So that's a big part of it. And the 506B allows us to do that because, like Matthias said, the main thing here is getting started. I mean, obviously, if you're someone who's done it for a while and have done well and you want to be a part of our organization, that too is very welcome. But
yeah,
the big,
yes,
the big emphasis is to get people started.
That's another great segue into kind of the discussion. I mentioned that setting our minimum is impacted by that 35 number.
Yeah.
If we have to raise $3 million and we're limited to 35 non-accredited investors, I have to draw some sort of line between, okay, if I only had non-accredited investors and I had 35 of them, I have to set the minimum at like almost 100,000, right, in order to get to our number of 3 million, in order to be able to execute the investment. So now we do have accredited, like I said, we have accredited investors that invest with us too. So I know there will be more than just non-accredited investors, so I can lower it down. But if I'm getting to 3 million, I might set it at 50. Maybe I'll set it at 50,000. We have the leeway to set it wherever we want, but we still have to get to that number in order to execute a successful investment. That's the other part. So it is very helpful when we have accredited investors, and accredited investors tend to have more cash to deploy at any given time due to the literal millionaire status. So it actually helps out the little guy. I can set that minimum lower. The more accredited investors we have that jump in with us, because now I can lower it. I'm confident that I'll have some bigger checks coming in for some other investors, and we can push the minimum a little lower. And again, like I said, if on that $3 million, if we get to 2.6 million, and now the last 400,000, that could be 6 investors or it could be 12 investors. I'd rather have the smaller investors get in if they want. And so I make an effort to go to people who've I know have been sitting on the fence for a while, or just haven't been able to scrape together whatever. And I'll go out when we're nearing the end of a raise, and I'll just be like, hey, we have space and we can let you in for whatever you can scrape together right now within reason. I mean, I don't want somebody coming up with, $3,000. That's almost not worth the wire fees of moving it around. But within reason, we try to let everybody in that we can.
Yeah. Yeah. You have let in as low as 5.
We have let $5,000 investors in. Yeah. Yes, that's true. Those are a lot smaller offerings though. So it kind of depends on, if I'm raising $400,000, I'm happy letting we're there. I'm happy letting a $5,000 in as like the last guy or whatever. But if I'm raising $3 million, we're going to be at this for a while if we start letting people in at $5,000. So
yeah.
And I've actually backed down my personal investment on a deal before to give somebody some space if we fill up too quickly, and somebody wanted it that I wanted to get started, then I'll give them some of the space that I was going to take with my own personal investment. That I've done that before too.
Right. And I would say that we're mainly talking about, if you have the money / you haven't gotten there. And I want to emphasize that we really mean it. And so if this intrigues you and you want to be a part of this, reach out and connect, and we establish that personal relationship. That, don't worry, you don't have to like go to coffee once a week. It's not that in depth.
Although I love cappuccino, and I need one right now, to be honest with you.
And once you get to that point where you're a part of our investor pool, I know that psychology very well. It's like, no, they're not gonna. I'm not there. I'm not good enough for. I don't have the money. That kind of thing. We really mean it. If we can let you in for what you've got, obviously within reason, we really want to. So don't be afraid to reach out to us if you want to get started and you're just not at 50,000. It's definitely a major part of mission we mean it. But I would also say the other side of that is people who are interested and want to know about it and want to get into it, but they're not entirely sure. A lower amount is a proof of concept. Has also, that's definitely been done. I don't want to put them on blast, but that's what my dad did.
We have a lot of investors that do that, and which I'm totally fine with. I had an investor was it yesterday or 2 days ago asked me, it's like, well, what would you do if you could do more? You could do the minimum. And I said, I always tell people, if you can do the minimum, do the minimum. If you can do more, do what you're comfortable with, because my goal is not for this to be your one and only investment.
Right.
My goal is to build that relationship over time. And I'm like, I don't ever want somebody to be like, well, I threw everything I had at you on one and it seemed like you pressured me into it. And, I'm like, well, no, I don't want to do that. So I'd much rather invest what you're comfortable with. And we'll go from there. And that's always everybody's, hey, what's the minimum investment for your offerings? And I'm like, well, how much time do you have? Because it's going to take some explaining. So I figured we'd put it out here in a podcast form. I was like, it depends, man. It depends on the offering, how much money we need to run a successful investment, how big the property is, what we can get it for, how much work it needs, how much capital expenditures it's going to need, all that stuff. So I suppose we're talking a lot less about the actual real estate and much more about the structure of the business, as it were. But yeah.
Well, yeah. So that's it, right? That is, and we can wrap it up here. That is a key point, I think, actually, to bring it back around to the beginning and tie a bow on this is you are investing in a business. A lot of people, I think, hear this and think, I'm investing in a property. And
yes and no.
Yes and no. You're investing in a business that owns a property.
Mm-hmm.
And that distinguishes it from, say, buying land or something that may appreciate and may be a good investment, but it's not going to be generating anything along the way. So yeah, we're talking about way more the running of the property than the property itself. And that's why syndications are so powerful, because Matthias is great at operating property. We've got a great team to operate properties, but unfortunately for us, we just don't got them pockets. Just go around
slapping down millions. Looks like a good deal.
Snapping up properties. Yeah, we need help. We need people to do it with us, and that's where you can come in.
Yeah,
100%. Sure. Yeah, that kind of turned into a pitch there at the end. Apologize for that, but but we just wanted to make sure everyone understood what we were talking about, because I realized we had kind of gotten to a point where there was a lot of implicit information and things we were talking about. So bringing it back to the basics. Yeah, what a syndication is, what a 506B is, and why we do it. So we appreciate you hanging out with us and listening. As always, we are more than happy to hear from you. And if you want to reach out and be a part of this, we'd love to have you. Otherwise, we hope you come back and do it again with us next week on another edition of the Get Invested podcast.
See you.